Welcome to Eerie Trail, where forgotten roads, haunted silence, and long shadows tell stories no one else dares to remember. If you're drawn to the strange, the lost, and the unsettling, you're in the right place. Like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that don't just scare, they stay with you. They say Banahaw doesn't exist anymore. Not officially. You won't find it on any GPS. No road signs pointing its way. Even old-timers who lived out west of Austin, deep into the hill country, near where the Guadalupe River cuts through limestone cliffs, won't say its name unless you've already said it first. And even then, they'll change the subject, sip their beer, and tell you to leave it alone. But Banahaw existed once. And some say it still does if you know where to look. That's where this all starts. It was late September when Jeremy and Andrea decided to go looking for Banahaw. They weren't ghost hunters, just bored college kids from Texas State who'd heard about it on a Reddit thread called Places You Shouldn't Go. It wasn't the usual clickbait. The post was short, just a photo of a sun-bleached wooden sign, nailed to a tree, with the letters Banahaw barely legible through splinters and bird droppings. Below it, someone had typed, "People went there. They didn't come back." Jeremy was hooked instantly. Andrea less so, but she didn't want to be the wet blanket. They'd been dating 6 months. He was funny and brave. She was quiet but curious. And truthfully, she needed a break from her routines. They packed an overnight bag, loaded up his truck, and drove west with nothing but a screenshot of the sign and the vague hint of off Ranch Road 336 past Leakey. The road turned wild the deeper they went, more deer than cars, prickly pear blooming from the sides of sun-warped fences, buzzards circling over cedar breaks. Cell signal vanished sometime after noon. They passed a rusted-out tractor in a field that looked like it had been swallowed by time. And that's when Jeremy slowed the truck. "This feel right to you?" he asked. Andrea shrugged. "Feels like the middle of nowhere." "Exactly." He grinned, pulling off onto a gravel side. Road so narrow the mesquites clawed both sides of the truck. The road wasn't marked, just a gap in the trees and the stink of old rain and animal shit. They drove for maybe 15 minutes before they saw it. The sign. Banahaw. Same as the photo. Same tree, same nails. As if it had been waiting. Jeremy parked and turned off the engine. The silence fell hard. "Just for a bit," he said. Andrea didn't answer. She kept staring at the sign. The path beyond it wasn't really a path. It was overgrown and tangled with vines and blackberry brambles. They pushed through anyway, swatting at flies and trying not to trip. The woods were too quiet, not just silent dead. No birds, no wind. Just the crunch of their boots and the whisper of their breathing. Then they smelled it. Something wet and spoiled, like meat left in the sun. Andrea gagged. Jeremy covered his nose and said, "Probably just a dead animal." They didn't find an animal. What they found was a clearing. It opened up suddenly, like something had torn the trees out by their roots. In the center of the clearing sat what looked like an old church, though no steeple. Just a squat, crumbling structure of weather-beaten boards and a sagging tin roof. It leaned slightly, like it might collapse under its own memory. "Jesus," Jeremy muttered. "How the hell is this not on a map?" Andrea didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed on the door. It was open. Jeremy took her hand and stepped inside. The floor groaned, but held. The air inside was worse than outside, hot, metallic, full of something rotted deep into the wood. The pews were still there, but warped and broken, like someone had taken an axe to them decades ago. At the front, where a pulpit should have been, there was nothing but a pit, an actual hole in the floor, perfectly round and lined with black stones. Flies buzzed around it, but there was no sound from within. "No way," Andrea whispered. "What is this place?" Jeremy walked closer. Maybe some kind of old Baptist church? No, Jeremy. That's not a baptismal. That's wrong. He knelt by the pit. The stones were too smooth, too uniform. He picked one up and nearly dropped it. It was cold. Freezing like ice pulled from a glacier. Hey, he said, turning to her. Get a picture of this. Andrea was already backing toward the door. I don't think we should be here, she said. Her voice was trembling. Come on, just a quick pic. A sound cut him off from the pit. Not a voice, not a breath. Something like nails on a chalkboard, but deeper, ancient. Hungry. Jeremy stood quickly, too quickly. He stumbled and his foot slipped. The edge of the pit cracked. Andrea screamed. He caught himself. Barely. They ran. Back through the clearing, through the woods, ignoring the way the trees seemed closer now, twisted like they were leaning toward them. The light was different too lower, although the sun hadn't set. The color of the world had bled out into something dusty and gray. When they reached the sign, Andrea saw something she hadn't before. Another sign nailed just beneath it. It hadn't been there when they came in. It read, You shouldn't have come here. You're part of it now. They didn't speak on the drive back. Not even when the signal returned or when they reached the gas station outside. Leaky and Jeremy vomited behind the pumps. Andrea refused to look at him when he tried to apologize. Silence grew between them after that. He started sleeping on the couch. She began waking at 3:33 a.m. every night, always from the same dream, a voice whispering her name from beneath the floorboards. They never spoke of Banaho again. Until the night Jeremy disappeared. The front door was wide open when Andrea woke. His truck was gone. His phone on the kitchen table. No note. No calls. Nothing. The police said he probably ran off. That couples break up all the time. That young men get overwhelmed. Andrea knew better. 2 weeks later, she returned to Ban Aho. Alone. She didn't leave a note. She didn't need to. No one would come looking. She drove west again, past the rusted tractor, through the narrow gravel road, until she saw the sign. Ban Aho. Except this time, another name was carved into it. Jeremy. Below it, someone had already begun carving hers. Andrea. She didn't scream. She just stepped into the trees and disappeared. They say if you go looking for Banaho now, you'll never find it in the same place twice. The trees shift. The roads change. Some say it's not a place at all, but a wound, something festering under the skin of Texas, feeding off the lost. And if you do find it, if you stand in that clearing and hear the buzzing of flies, feel the cold breath from the pit, know this: it's already too late. They call it Henderson Bend, but nobody lives there anymore. It used to be a farm town, tiny, maybe 24 families at its peak, nestled at the edge of the Brazos River, where it curves like a rusted hook about an hour south of Waco. You'd miss the dirt road turnoff unless you were looking for it, and even if you were, chances are you drive right past it the first time. The sign's long gone, torn down or rotted away. No one's replaced it. That's the kind of place it was. A town that didn't fight to be remembered. I found Henderson Bend because my brother died there. Toby wasn't supposed to be in Texas at all. He'd been living in Phoenix, working HVAC and trying to stay sober. When I got the call from the sheriff's department out of Falls County, they said his car had been found abandoned off FM 1243, driver's side door wide open, keys still in the ignition. Inside the glove box, they found a spiral notebook with a single page ripped out, the rest blank. That page had one word written across it in pencil: below. No one could explain what he was doing in Henderson Bend. No connection. No friends. Or family. He'd never even mentioned it. But I knew my brother, and I knew that whatever led him there was real enough to kill for. So I went. I didn't tell my wife. She would have stopped me, or worse, insisted on coming. This wasn't something I could share. The road out to the bend was already in bad shape by the time I turned off the highway. Deep ruts, high grass, shredded remains of armadillos half-eaten and bleached by the sun. I drove for 15 miles without seeing a single house. Then the trees got thick. Pine and ash, mostly, some of them so old they bent toward the road like they were trying to speak. My cell signal vanished not long after. Knew I was close when I saw the bridge. Old iron, barely wide enough for my truck, with water from the brazos lapping against the supports like black oil. I stopped, got out, and listened. Silence. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of the river slapping something wet against the rocks. I drove over, tires creaking on rusted metal, and into the ghost of Henderson Bend. The town wasn't gone, not physically. The buildings were still there, or what was left of them. A schoolhouse with its windows shattered. A general store with a faded 7-Up sign dangling by one nail. Houses collapsed inward like their bones had given out. I parked in front of what looked like the old post office. Toby's car was still there, off the shoulder. I climbed out, looked around, and listened again. This time I heard something rattling faint, like something metal tapping against wood in the breeze. But there was no breeze. I followed it past. A thicket of cedar, down a narrow path that opened behind the store, and saw the well. It was old. Stone and moss-covered, with a wooden beam overhead that might have held a pulley once. A rusted chain still dangled down into the dark. No cover, no rope, just the open mouth of the thing, yawning black and deep. The sound was coming from inside it. I should have left, right then. Turned around and driven until I saw power lines and traffic again. But I didn't. I looked down. It wasn't the kind of darkness that swallowed light. It was the kind that seemed to breathe. Then I heard it. A voice. Far down. Too far. It said my name, not a whisper. Not a trick of echo. My name plain as day. From below. I staggered back. My foot slipped on something. A rock, maybe. I fell and scraped my hand. When I looked down, I saw it wasn't a rocket. It was a bone. Non-animal. Human. A finger, with the tip gnawed off. I scrambled to my feet. My heart was hammering, sweat pouring off my face even though the air had turned cool. I turned to leave and found myself staring at the schoolhouse. Except it wasn't where it had been. It was closer. I backed away, blinking. The layout had changed. The buildings had moved. I could see Toby's car, but it was facing the wrong way. I reached for my phone. No signal. I turned back to the well, intending to throw something down. Anything just to prove to myself that I hadn't heard what I thought I did. But the well was gone. Just a patch of weeds and dry dirt. That's when I knew. I wasn't in the same place anymore. Not really. Something had shifted. I ran to Toby's car. It was locked. I smashed the window with a rock. Glass shattered. Like ice. Inside, the notebook was still there, just as the sheriff said. But when I flipped it open, the pages weren't blank anymore. Each page was filled with writing. Scribbled, messy, overlapping. All in Toby's hand. One phrase repeated over and over. Don't look down. I looked up and saw him. Toby. Standing by the post office, pale, barefoot, clothes soaked to the knees like he climbed out of a river. He looked at me and opened his mouth. Water poured out, gallons of it, rushing down his chest, black and thick, mixed with something pink and raw. He pointed behind me. I turned. The well was back, but something was coming out of it, not climbing, rising, like being pulled up by an invisible force. First came the chain. Then came the hands, not human hands. Gray, bone thin, too many fingers. Nails, like fish hooks. I ran, back over the bridge, into the trees. The sound of the chain followed me. I don't remember driving. I just remember headlights in my mirror and the screaming. Not from me, from the well, it didn't want me to leave. I made it to a gas station outside Rosebud and collapsed on the pavement. A sheriff's deputy found me there 2 hours later. I told him everything. He nodded like he'd heard it before, wrote down my statement, and told me to go home. That was 6 months ago. No one ever found Toby. Not his body. Not his car. Nothing. They say he never existed. No record of him in Falls County. No fingerprints. His name's not even in their missing persons database. But I have the notebook. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the rattling faint, like a chain swinging in the dark, calling my name. From below, they call it Dead Horse Lake, but there ain't no horses there. Not anymore. I first heard about it from a tow truck driver named Red. We were both sitting at a roadside bar off Highway 79, east of Taylor, swapping stories while waiting out a thunderstorm. He was one of those guys who only talks when the beer's cold and the rain's loud enough to keep people from listening. He told me that there's a lake a few miles down a dirt trail off County Road 344 so far back in the sticks that even Google Earth hasn't bothered to scan it in detail. Said it was cursed, said the land was bad, didn't say haunted. Said bad. Folks used to fish there, he said, used to swim. Camp, you know, but the water turned. About 20 years back. Went black, like ink. No fish since. No birds. No bugs even. And people started hearing things. Seeing things. Smelling things. I laughed at that part. Smelling things? He just stared at me, slow and mean. Like rot and smoke. And something like wet dog left out in the sun. The bartender gave us both a look, like he'd heard the story before and didn't want it told again. But Red leaned in close and told me about a family that went missing out there in '98. Mom, Dad, 2 kids. Camper still parked by the water. Keys on the dash, radio on. No sign of struggle. Just gone. No bodies. No prints. No answers. They drained. Part of the lake afterward. Not all of it. Just enough to look. They found something all right, but no one ever said what. Just that the sheriff at the time walked into the woods and shot himself that night. Red finished his beer and said, "Don't go out there. Not even if you think you don't believe in that sort of thing." I did go out there. A week later. Don't ask me why. I guess it's the same reason people climb mountains or poke at hornets. Nests, curiosity, ego. A little emptiness you want to fill with something strange. I had a 4-day weekend and no one waiting on me back home. I packed my gear tent, lantern, .38 revolver, not because I expected trouble, but because I'd be alone and headed out just before sunset. Took me 3 tries to find the trail Red mentioned. Overgrown, no signage. Just a gap in the brush, where an old wooden post leaned like it was drunk and tired of standing. The road to the lake was more like a tunnel, through dying mesquites and bone-dry oaks. Everything looked sunburned and hungry. When I got out of the truck, the silence hit me like a wall. No birds, no wind. Just the buzzing in my own ears and the faint smell of something like burnt grease and pond scum. Dead Horse Lake wasn't large. Maybe 200 yards across, stagnant, surface like oil. No movement, no ripple. Just still, black water reflecting the bruised sky. I set up camp anyway. Told myself I was just camping, just observing. Not investigating. Not chasing ghosts. That night I made a fire and sat by it with a cup of instant coffee, watching the lake. It didn't reflect the stars. It didn't reflect the moon. Just blackness. Like looking into a hole, sometime after midnight I heard it. A splash. Not a fish jumping. This was heavy, like something falling in. Then came the dragging sound, wet and slow. Something pulling itself across the far bank. I grabbed the revolver and stood by the fire, staring into the dark. I saw movement, just a ripple at first. Then, a shape dot. It looked like a horse, but wrong. Its legs bent sideways like broken branches. Its head hung low, half submerged. Something squirmed across its back, smaller, pale, human-shaped. I blinked, and it was gone. No ripples. No sound. Just the black water and the smell of something old and sick. I didn't sleep. Next morning, I told myself it was a dream. Maybe a hallucination, lack of sleep. But the ground near the lake told a different story. Hoof prints, bare footprints, leading from the water to my tent. And then back. I packed up. Fast, but the truck wouldn't start. Dead. Battery fine. Gas full. No reason. I got out, slammed the door, and saw the handprint. On the window. Smudged, long fingers. No palm, as if something with no skin had pressed itself against the glass. I didn't scream. I should have. But I didn't. I started walking. 12 miles to the nearest gas station. No phone service. No houses. The trees seemed to move with me. Not swaying, leaning. Closing in, I walked until my legs burned. Until I couldn't hear the birds because there weren't any. Until I saw the sign again. The leaning post. I was back. At the lake, even though I'd walked straight, even though I'd marked my trail. The tent was gone. The truck was gone. Just me and the black water. And the noise. A splashing, a dragging. Closer now I ran, through brush, through thorns. I don't know how far. I just ran until the trees thinned and I saw pavement. County Road 344. A rancher found me walking barefoot at dawn. Bloody feet, eyes so wide he said I looked like a goddamn possum in a house fire. I told him what I saw. He didn't say much. Just nodded and said he'd heard stories too. Sighed. People go out to Dead Horse Lake and come back. Different. If they come back at all, that was 4 years ago. I never found my truck. Never went back. No one believes me except Red, and he died in a rollover last summer. Drunk. They say he swerved to miss something in the road. Left no skid marks. The wreck happened less than a mile from the lake. Sometimes I dream about it. The lake. The dragging sound. The pale shape on the horse's back. It always looks up at me. No eyes. Just holes. Sometimes I wake up to find black water on my floor. And hoof prints leading to the bed. They say you can still hear the siren in Delmore, even though the town hasn't had a fire department or people for almost 40 years. Delmore's not on most maps anymore. It sits forgotten in a triangle of forgotten roads between Mineral, Wells, Breckenridge, and a dried-up reservoir that hasn't seen rain since Clinton was in office. It used to be an oil town back in the 20s and 30s. Roughnecks, derricks, saloons, the works. Then the wells ran dry, and so did the money. The town shrank, then withered. By 1984, the last person left, if you don't count the missing ones. My Uncle Hank was one of them. He was a radio technician for the Texas Department of Public Safety, worked the repeater towers out west. My dad said he used to go into Delmore once a month to service a forgotten emergency broadcast unit the county never officially decommissioned. The whole place was supposed to be off-grid, but it still lit up on certain emergency test runs. Ghost equipment, they called it. Dead Tech. In May of '84, he went in and never came out. They found his van parked beside the old Delmore Municipal building, door open, keys in the ignition, tool case left behind. The building itself was untouched, no signs of a break-in, no blood, no struggle. Just a trail of boot prints leading inside, none coming out. They searched for 6 days. Helicopters. Dogs. The whole thing. Nothing. My father was one of the searchers. He came back quiet, changed. Wouldn't talk about it except to say that he saw things in that building. Heard things. He had nightmares for the rest of his life. Screaming in his sleep about sirens and shadows that knew his name, I never saw. My uncle again, but last year I inherited his journal. My dad passed and left me a box of his stuff. At the bottom was a field notebook I'd never seen before. Black leather, stained with what looked like oil. The first 20 pages were work notes, repairs done to towers, equipment models, signal strength tests. But halfway through, something changed. He started writing about the hum. He said it came through the wires even when the equipment was off. Said it spoke in Morse code, but the letters didn't match anything in English. One entry simply read, "IT's not a frequency. It's a door." After reading that, I couldn't let it go. So I went to Delmore. The road in was rough paved once, long ago, but now cracked and vein-like, full of weeds and broken bones of armadillos. The sky was low and yellow, like it didn't want to see what I was doing. I followed the GPS until it cut out. From there, I used the notebook. It was still there. The town, or what was left of it. Buildings sagged into themselves like rotten fruit. Windows broken. Doors swinging in the wind even though there was no wind. And there, just where the map said it'd be, was the municipal building. Brick, 2 stories, front doors ajar like a mouth waiting to speak. I went inside. The air smelled of copper and mildew. Damp paper. Something else, 2 burnt insulation, maybe. The lobby still had the county seal over the reception desk, cracked but intact. Dust coated everything, but there were boot prints leading in. Mine weren't the only ones. I followed the prints down a corridor and into what used to be the communications room. Rusted radios sat on metal shelves like sleeping insects. Dials. Missing. Cables hanging like vines. Then the hum started. I didn't touch anything. Swear to God, I just stood there and the air started to vibrate. It wasn't loud, but I could feel it in my teeth. Like pressure, like altitude. Then one of the radios clicked on. It shouldn't have. It had no power. The wires were cut. The dial was shattered, but the static poured out thick and wet, like breath. And beneath it something else. A voice, warbling, distant, like someone trying to shout through a wall of water. Then came the siren, a single long wail, rising from deep inside the building. The fire department alarm, probably disconnected since the 60s. It screamed like a dying animal. My hands flew to my ears. But the sound wasn't outside, it was inside me. And it said a name. Mine. Over and over. I ran. Down the hall, back into the lobby and stopped cold. The doors were gone. Not open. Gone. Just solid wall where the entrance had been, and the floor was wet. I looked down and saw black water creeping in from under the walls, slow and bubbling. The room began to change, the paint peeled in reverse. The chairs unburnt themselves and stood straight. The clock above the door began to tick backwards, and then I saw them. People. Standing where they shouldn't be, half transparent, wearing old clothes, overalls, boots, dresses from another time. All staring at me. Their mouths were open, each one, but they weren't screaming. They were listening. To the siren. It was louder now. It hurt. The water reached my boots. Freezing, thicker than it should have been. And something moved beneath it, something big. I saw eyes, wide and flat, like an eel, like a man. And then the voice changed. It wasn't just a siren anymore. It was a call, a command. Stay. That word, clear, loud, final. I screamed and shoved through the wall where the doors used to be. Drywall gave way like paper. I fell out into the dust and heat and broken road. The sky had changed. Too dark. No sun. Just clouds like boiling ash. The building behind me was gone. Just a slab of concrete and the broken stump of a flagpole. I walked until I found my truck. It was parked sideways in the road. Door open. Engine still running, even though the keys were in my pocket. When I got home, I burned the notebook, or tried to. It didn't burn. Not completely. The fire turned the pages black, but the writing stayed, like it was burned in before I found it. Sometimes, when my house is quiet and the lights are off, I hear the hum and the siren. I know it's calling me back, like it never let me leave, like it never let any of them leave. It was called the Devil's Mile, and if you grew up around Jasper or Newton County, you'd heard the name. Not on a map, not in any official county record, but it lived in the mouths of truckers, hunters, and folks who spent more time under the sky than under a roof. They'd say there was a stretch of Highway 190 somewhere between the towns, though no one could tell you exactly where time didn't work right, where GPS failed, where radios turned to static, where people disappeared. The thing is, it's not a real mile. Sometimes it's longer. Sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes it loops, folding in on itself like the spine of a snake coiling to strike. Folks say it's cursed, or haunted, or hungry. All I know is, I drove it once, and I don't think I ever really left. It started like this. I was hauling a classic Camaro from Houston to a collector in Shreveport. Late job, the kind of thing you take when you've got no wife, no kids, and no reason to say no. I loaded the car around 8 p.m. and started heading east on 190, trying to make time before the fog rolled in. I'd made that drive a dozen times. It should have been a straight shot, quiet roads, nothing but pine and swamp on either side. I passed the Trinity River Bridge, noticed the moon real low and fat in the sky, and somewhere past Woodville the CB went dead. No warning. No static, just click on. Then my headlights flickered. Not enough to kill the beam, just enough to get the hairs on my arms standing. And then the trees started looking wrong. They were too close. The highway cuts through the woods, sure, but this was different. These trees leaned in. Thick pines, but twisted at the base. They didn't look windblown. They looked positioned, like someone had bent them deliberately toward the road. That's when I passed the first sign. It was rusted. Over, barely legible, but I caught it in my lights just long enough to make out the words. The Devil's Mile. Turn back. Thought it was a joke, some hillbilly prank. Maybe even graffiti. I checked the odometer and kept driving. That was a mistake. I drove for what felt like an hour. No turns, no exits. No other cars. Just that two-lane strip and those looming trees. My fuel gauge didn't move. The time on the dash froze, 10:12 p.m. I kept glancing at my phone. No signal. No GPS. Just the battery icon slowly dying like a candle in a jar. That's when I saw the man. He was standing in the breakdown lane, not waving, not hitchhiking. Just standing, facing the truck. His face was blank, pale, mouth open. He wore a state trooper's uniform, but it looked old, faded. The hat was wrong, like something out of the 50s. I slowed down, instinct kicking in. But the moment my foot touched the brake, he vanished. Not stepped aside. Vanished. I sped up, heart hammering. Hands slick on the wheel. I told myself I was tired, overworked, seeing things. Then the road twisted, not a curve. A knot. 1 second I was going straight, the next I was upside down inside the loop of the road like I'd been turned inside out. My stomach dropped and the whole truck shuddered like it had hit a pothole the size of a ditch. Then it corrected. Just flat highway again. Only now it was dark. And I mean dark. No moon. No stars. No dashboard lights. Just the dull orange glow of the Camaro's taillights in my rear view. I flicked the high beams. Nothing changed. Like the air itself swallowed light. That's when I heard the horn. Not from my truck. From the car on the trailer, the Camaro. It honked twice. Long and slow. Then the brake lights blinked. On, off, on again, like Morse code. I pulled over. Got out. My boots hit asphalt that felt warm and soft, like old skin. I walked to the trailer, flashlight in hand, and saw something that still makes. My stomach turned. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat of the Camaro, hands on the wheel, head tilted to the side. I couldn't see the face through the glass. It was fogged over, smeared from the inside, but I swear on my life, that figure was watching me, breathing. I tapped on the window. No response. I opened the driver's side door and found the seat, empty. But the seat was warm, and there was moisture on the inside of the windshield. Someone had been there. I slammed the door and backed away. That's when I heard the tires. Not mine. Coming up the road. I turned and saw headlights in the distance. At first I was relieved. Another driver, maybe help. But the lights didn't behave right. They moved too fast, then too slow, then flickered and split into 4, then 6. Like spider eyes glinting in a cave, and then they stopped, right in front of me. But there was no vehicle. Just lights, floating, burning like coals. And behind them, a shape began to unfold, tall, wrong, like something wearing the idea of a person. It whispered my name. In my father's voice, then my mother's, then a voice I didn't recognize but felt like I should have. I ran, jumped in the cab and gunned the engine. Tires screamed. The road twisted again, upside down, sideways, inside out. The Camaro groaned on the trailer like it was trying to scream. I passed another sign. You've been here before. My hand shook. The road was buckling now, splitting at the edges. Trees began to move, not swaying, walking. Their roots peeled up like claws. I drove through it all. And suddenly I was out, just like that. Back on the clean stretch of Highway 190, stars above me, moon rising, CB buzzing with chatter again. My phone dinged texts, missed calls. 1:17 a.m., I drove all the way to Shreveport. Without stopping, dropped off the car without saying a word. Never explained the handprints on the inside of the Camaro's windshield, or the scratches on the trailer floor like something tried to climb out. I told myself it was a dream, or a hallucination, until a month ago I got another job. Same route, same road, new car, new client. But when I checked the manifest, my blood ran cold. It wasn't a Camaro this time. It was the same license plate. Same Veng. Same car, back from wherever it went. I canceled the job. Threw the keys in the river. But at night, when it's quiet, I still hear it. The horn. 2 long honks, calling me back to the Devil's Mile, where I left something behind, or maybe where something left itself inside me. They don't build houses like they used to, and maybe that's a good thing. When I bought the Blanton place, I thought I was getting a deal. 40 acres of pine-studded land west of Huntsville, a turn-of-the-century farmhouse, barn out back, and not a neighbor in sight. The structure had sat empty since the 90s, maybe longer. The online photos showed sagging wood, warped floors, and vines creeping up the siding like fingers trying to pull it underground. But I didn't care. I'd just gotten divorced, left my job, and needed a place where the world couldn't find. M.E. A man makes strange choices when he's trying to disappear. The first time I pulled up the gravel drive, I felt something off. Not fear. Not even nerves, more like resistance. Like the house didn't want me there. The wind died when I stepped out of the truck. The cicadas went quiet. The air was thick, but not with heat. It was stillness. Like the whole place was holding its breath. The front door stuck, swollen from decades of humidity. The key turned harder than it should have. Inside, it smelled like dust and old wood, but there was another scent beneath it, something sweet and rotten. Like peaches left too long in a metal drawer. I chalked it up to mold. The previous owners had left a few pieces behind. A rocking chair in the corner. A mattress upstairs, coiled with spider webs. A Bible with swollen pages sat open on the kitchen table, like someone had been reading it when they were interrupted and never came back. I slept on the floor that first night, curled up in a sleeping bag in the front room. The wind picked up around 3 a.m., whistling through cracks in the boards. I kept hearing what sounded like footsteps on the second floor, soft, deliberate creaks. Too slow for rodents. Too heavy for raccoons. I told myself the house was settling, but houses don't pace. The next morning I found footprints on the stairs. Bare. Human. Small. They trailed down halfway, then disappeared. No mud, no dust disturbed. Just faint impressions on the old wood, like someone had stepped there in memory. Only, I didn't leave. I should have, but I didn't. Pride kept me there. I spent the next week hauling in furniture, rewiring the fuse box, fixing plumbing. I kept busy. Pretended not to notice that every hammer blow echoed twice. Pretended not to hear whispering from the upstairs hall when I was downstairs with the radio off. Pretended the house wasn't watching me. It started to turn in the second week. I'd fall asleep on the couch and wake up somewhere else. One night I opened my eyes and found myself lying in the old rusted bathtub on the second floor, fully clothed, water up to my chest. I don't remember walking there. Another time I woke up outside, face down in the dirt behind the barn, my skin covered in tiny scratches like I'd crawled through brush. Then came the door. There's a room at the end of the upstairs hallway. No knob, just a warped wooden panel painted the same color as the walls. I didn't notice it at first, but I'd catch it in the corner of my eye, this blank space where something should be. When I pressed my ear against it, I could hear movement. On the other side, breathing, and sometimes faint laughter, like a child. I checked the floor plan from the county archives. There was no record of any room there, just empty space between walls. But the house knew better. It always knows. I started dreaming of the Blantons. The original owners. In my dreams, they stood at the edge of the tree line, watching the house from the outside. There was a man, a woman, and a girl. The girl wore a white dress and held something in her hands, something wet and heavy, dripping red onto her shoes. I never saw their faces, just black holes where their eyes should be. One night, I woke up and the girl was sitting in the rocking chair by the fireplace. She didn't move, didn't speak, just rocked slow and steady, her eyes glinting like glass marbles. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She sat there for what felt like hours. And then she whispered, "You're in my room." The next day I ripped out the wall upstairs. I couldn't take it anymore. Took a crowbar to the blank door and pulled until the boards groaned and split. Behind it was a narrow room barely wide, enough to walk through. The walls were covered in drawings. Charcoal, smeared, scratched directly into the plaster. Dozens of them, hundreds. Children with no eyes. Figures hanging from trees. A house burning, over and over again. And in the center of the back wall, scrawled in something brown and flaking, "She never left." That night, the whispers got louder. I barricaded the room, but it didn't matter. The rocking chair started moving on its own. Lights flickered, even with new wiring. And the smell came back. Sweet, decayed, familiar. I realized what it reminded me of. Blood and peaches. Then the phone rang. I hadn't connected service yet, but it rang anyway. I picked it up, heart pounding, expecting silence. Instead, a voice said, "You know it's hers now," and the line went dead. I packed that night, left most of my things, drove until dawn and never looked back. But some things follow you. See her sometimes. In reflections. At the edge of parking lots. In the rearview mirror when there's no one in the back seat. Always watching, always waiting, because I opened her room and she never left. They called it Rattlesnake Hollow, though the name had nothing to do with snakes. About 15 miles southeast of Lubbock, past the grain silos and oil fields, there's a narrow canyon cut into the land like a split lip. Locals don't go near it. Kids make dares, sure, but even the bravest ones don't last long after sundown. The place doesn't feel right. The wind dies at the mouth of the hollow. Birds don't fly over it. The rock walls sweat when there's no rain. And if you spend enough time near it, you'll hear the crying. That's why I went. I was working for the Texas Department of Transportation, mapping flood zones and erosion areas. They sent me to survey that patch of land because runoff from nearby fracking sites had started pushing the canyon walls wider. They figured it was just a geological concern. What they didn't realize was the hollow had its own rules. I found that out the hard way. I arrived just after noon. Blistering sun, dirt road behind me, GPS barely holding a signal. I parked the truck about 100 yards from the rim and started the trek in. At first glance, it was just a gash in the earth, red soil, layers of old shale, scraggly mesquite trees clinging to the edges like brittle claws. I descended slowly, sliding over loose rocks, keeping my gear close. The temperature dropped the deeper I went, 10 degrees. Then 20 by the time I hit the canyon floor. I could see my breath. That didn't make sense. It was 98 degrees above. Pulled out my phone. No signal. The barometer had flatlined. The compass spun slowly even though I was standing still. I chalked it up to the minerals in the rock. Interference. But it didn't sit right. The silence was too deep, too total. No wind, no echo when I called out. Just that feeling in my gut, like someone had just walked over my grave. The crying started around 2 p.m. At first, it was faint. Could have been wind through the rocks, but then it sharpened. Became unmistakably human. A child. A girl. Sobbing somewhere deeper in the canyon, hidden behind stone curves and jagged turns. I should have left. Every instinct told me to turn around and climb out. But I didn't. I followed the sound. It led me to a narrow path carved along the rock wall, just wide enough to slide through sideways. The crying grew louder the farther I went, not scared anymore. Angry. Desperate. Where are you? I shouted. It stopped. Then I heard it whisper, just behind me. Down here. I turned. Nothing there. Just dust motes in the cold, dry air. Kept walking. The path widened into a bowl-shaped depression in the canyon floor, maybe 20 feet across. At the center was a sinkhole, perfectly round. Smooth edges, like it had been drilled out. No debris, just blackness. Deep enough that my flashlight beam didn't hit bottom. I dropped a rock in. Never heard it land. The crying came again, from inside. I lowered the flashlight, leaning closer. The beam flickered, caught movement. Pale hands, thin, gripping the wall maybe 10 feet down. Then a face. A girl. Couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. Skin gray and mottled like old newspaper. Hair wet and stringy, eyes wide and wrong. Too wide. She didn't blink. Help me, she said. I dropped to my knees, reaching for her. She reached back. Her fingers were too long and backwards. I froze. She smiled too wide, too sharp, and pulled herself up with impossible strength. I ran, didn't think, just moved. Back through the slit in the rock, up the canyon path, scrambling. Over loose shale that seemed to slide under me like the hollow was trying to keep me. The air grew hot again, the pressure pounding in my ears. I didn't stop until I saw my truck, gleaming in the sun like a lifeline. I threw open the door and hit the gas. Didn't look back. Not until that night. I was staying in a motel in Post about 30 miles out. Figured I'd report it as a structural anomaly and be done with it. But when I went to upload the canyon photos from my camera, they were gone. Every shot after 1:45 p.m. corrupted, static, streaks of black like veins across the images. Then, the crying started again. In the room, right behind me. I spun around, hard hammering, and there she was. The girl, standing at the foot of the bed, dripping onto the carpet, her arms hanging too low at her sides, her head tilted like a bird watching something squirm. "You heard me," she said. "That means you're mine." I blacked out, woke up at dawn. Lying in the bathtub, clothes soaked through, the room door wide open. No sign of her, no damage. Just a smell-damp earth and something metallic. I left Texas the next day. Quit my job, changed my number, moved to Oregon. But none of it matters. I still hear her. Some nights, I'll wake up and my feet will be dirty with red dust. Sometimes there's water on the floor, pooling from nowhere. Sometimes I'll hear her voice through the vents, whispering, "Come back down." And the worst part? I want to. I don't know why. The hollow's still in me. Like a hook-sunken bone, I dream of the sinkhole, the perfect circle, the darkness that watches back. And one day I think I'll go, because she's still waiting, still crying, and I think I left part of me down there. They say Lake Jericho doesn't appear on any official map after 1982. Something about an administrative error or the reservoir not meeting size regulations. But if you ask folks in B County, they'll tell you a different story. They'll say the lake was buried, intentionally forgotten, like it had swallowed too much. Or someone. Or maybe something. I only went out there because of my brother. We'd grown up in Beeville, a nowhere town with more rust than money. He'd stayed after high school, working oil and odd jobs. I'd left for college and never looked back. But 2 weeks before he disappeared, he started leaving me voicemails, long, rambling ones. Whispering at first, then shouting. By the end, I couldn't tell if he was drunk, high, or simply losing his mind. They all said the same thing, though. "She came out of the lake," he kept saying. "She walked across the water, barefoot, pale, eyes like fish. And she's been following me ever since." The sheriff called me 2 days after they found his truck empty, parked at the overgrown entrance to a gated dirt road that didn't lead anywhere. But Lake Jericho, they never found his body. I flew in that weekend. The gate was still there, half-eaten by vines, chained shut with rusted links and a padlock anyone with bolt cutters could break. There was a faded sign nailed to the fence that read, "Condemned nitrogen monoxide entry." No official seal, no state stamp. Just black spray paint over warped wood. Like someone wanted to look official without asking permission. I parked a mile down and walked the rest. The road was more animal trail than path. Burrs clawed at my jeans. Skeletal mesquite trees loomed like crooked fingers. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. By the time I reached the shoreline, it was dead silent. No birds. No bugs. Just the lake. It was wrong. Too still. Too dark. The surface reflected nothing, not the overcast sky, not the trees. It looked like oil, like something spilled across the earth and never dried. There were no docks, no boats. Just a crumbling concrete platform that might have been part of an old water station. I found cigarette butts there, a beer can, his lighter. That's when I smelled it, like mildew and copper, and something. Sweet. Rotten. Sweet. The kind of smell that clings to the back of your throat. I stood at the edge and tried to call his name. Nothing echoed, not even the wind stirred. Then I saw the footprints. Not mine. Bare feet, leading from the edge of the lake, up through the silt and weeds, straight toward the woods behind me. Wet prints. Fresh. I followed. The path wove through tangled undergrowth, the mud thick and soft, The prints never faltered. Same stride. Same direction. No signs of struggle. And not a single other footprint, just those pale ovals, pressed perfectly into the ground like the person who made them wasn't walking so much as gliding. Then the sound came like humming, but wrong it didn't follow a tune. Just rose and fell with no pattern, like someone trying to remember a song from long ago. I froze. It was coming from ahead. Maybe 20 yards. Then it stopped. I stepped forward and saw the cabin. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Walls half collapsed, roof caved in, vines threading through the windows. But there was smoke curling from the chimney. And in the window, a figure. Watching me. Not moving. Just watching. I stepped closer and it vanished. I wanted to run. Every nerve in me screamed to get back to the truck. But I thought of my brother, and how this was the last place he'd ever been. I stepped inside. The floor sagged under my weight. Dust hung in the air like cobwebs. There was no furniture, no light, no smell of smoke despite what I'd seen. Just one thing, a mirror, leaning against the far wall, 6 feet tall, cracked across the center, and it reflected the lake. Not the room. The lake, its black surface, unmoving, the shoreline, and standing at the edge me, but I wasn't moving. My reflection stood still, even as I took a step. Then it smiled, and something rose from the water behind it. A shape. Tall, thin, dripping. No face, just smooth, pale skin stretched too tight across bone. Its arms were too long, its legs too narrow. Its hair floated around it like seaweed, and where its eyes should have been dash holes. Not empty. Just dark, like the lake itself had borrowed a face. I stumbled backward, eyes locked on the glass, and the thing stepped closer in the reflection. My double didn't flinch, just turned slowly, and walked back into the water, hand in hand with the figure. Then the mirror cracked again. Split down the center, and the lake and the reflection began to ripple. I ran, didn't look back. I got to the truck as the sun was dawning. The wind had returned, the insects buzzed. The world was moving again, but I wasn't sure it was the same world. That night, I stayed at a motel outside George West, unable to sleep. And at 3:13 a.m., my phone rang. A FaceTime call. No name, no number, just lake. I answered. The screen was black at first. Then it flickered, showed my brother. Underwater. Eyes open, lips blue, skin pale, floating in slow, dreamlike suspension. Then something drifted into frame beside him. That shape. It turned its head, and even through the grainy feed, I saw its mouth open, too wide, too full of teeth. And then the screen went dead. I smashed the phone. Left Texas that morning, but I still see the footprints outside my apartment, on my balcony. In the hallway. They're always wet, always clean, like something came out of water that shouldn't exist. And sometimes, when I pass by mirrors, I don't see myself anymore. I see the lake. And someone standing on its shore, smiling. The first time someone told me about Old Lady Harrow's property, I was working a fence crew out in Schleicher County, west of El Dorado. That's ranch country, hot, dry, stretched out and tired, with oil pumps nodding to themselves like they know something you don't. We'd been repairing cattle wire that week, fixing posts scorched by summer wildfires. One night around the tailgate, someone brought her up. You know that stretch of land out off County Road 2136? One guy said, spitting into the dirt, used to be a church out there. Little stone thing, Catholic. They tore it down in the 50s, said it burned, but that land ain't right. What's wrong with it? I asked. He looked around like he didn't want the mesquite trees to hear. They say she never left, that old widow. Used to live behind the church in a shack, with no windows, Name was Harrow. They said she talked to animals, or maybe they talked to her. And after the church caught fire, they found the priest in the well out back, all cut up, clean, like a butcher job. No blood anywhere, just the pieces, and Harrow was gone. He didn't say much after that, but the idea dug into me. I'd been living in my truck for months by then, no family, no plans. Sometimes the road feels like the only place that doesn't push back. But I kept thinking about that land, and one night after too much beer and too little common sense, I drove out there. Found the turnoff just after midnight. It wasn't marked anymore, just a gap in the barbed wire and two mesquites growing, close together like a crooked archway. The road was rutted and dry, barely more than a trail. I followed it with my brights on, tires crunching gravel, the moon hidden behind bruised clouds. The land looked dead. No grass, no movement. The air was dry as ash. After about half a mile, I saw what was left of the church, a stone foundation, ringed by blackened posts and crumbling limestone. Looked more like a burial site than a building now. And behind it, nestled in a sagging grove of trees, was a shack. Just like the story said. One room. No windows. I parked and stepped out. The silence was total. Not even the buzz of insects. I approached the shack, drawn by something I couldn't name. There was no fear at first. Just stillness, curiosity. The door creaked open when I touched it. Inside, it smelled like dry flowers and old meat. The walls were covered in writing. Symbols I didn't recognize. Some looked like animals, others like parts of the body. Eyes, teeth, bones. They'd been etched in charcoal, blood, maybe both. The floor had been swept clean, but in the center of the room was a pit, no wider than a barrel, ringed in old stones. The well. I stepped closer, peering down. It didn't seem deep, just shadows curling up like smoke. Then I heard it. Raspy, low, woman's voice. Did he send you? I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The voice had come from inside the well. I backed toward the door, and the voice came again. Tell him I kept them all. Everyone. Tell him I fed them to the dark like he asked. I ran outside. The wind had picked up. It sounded like breathing, or maybe whispering. I couldn't tell. The mesquites had closed tighter around the road. Their branches seemed to lean in, touching the roof of the truck. I got in and gunned the engine, but the wheels spun. The dirt beneath had turned soft. Wet. I was stuck. I slammed the door and cursed. The whispering grew louder. I turned and saw her, standing by the well. Skin like burnt paper, eyes like stones, dressed in something black that didn't move with the wind. Her mouth was open, but she didn't speak. Her arms hung too long, her fingers brushing the ground. And behind her, something moved. At first, I thought it was dogs. Then I realized it was people. Crawling. Dozens of them. Naked, gray, slick with mud. Their faces were wrong, smoothed out like melted wax. No eyes, no mouths. Just hollow indentations where humanity used to live. They moved like they didn't have bones. Or like the bones weren't where they were supposed to be. She pointed at me. And they started crawling faster. I floored it. The truck roared, fishtailed, and finally caught traction. I tore down the path, mesquite scraping metal like claws. Branches shattered against the windshield. I didn't stop until I hit pavement. Drove straight to San Angelo, slept in a Walmart. Parking lot with the windows up and the lights on, but it didn't leave me. That night, I found scratches on the inside of the windshield. Thin, like fingernails. Then came the dreams. Always the same. I'm back at the shack. I'm inside the well. But the well's not a hole anymore, it's a mouth. And I'm being swallowed, slowly, the stone teeth grinding me into the dark. I hear her voice in my ear, whispering secrets in a language I almost understand. she says. The land was always hungry, and she was just the first to feed it. Since then, I've tried to find that road again. I've gone out there 5 times. It's never there. Sometimes the land just keeps going. Sometimes there's a fence where there shouldn't be. Sometimes I drive for hours and end up back where I started. But every time, the dream gets stronger. I think she's looking for me, because I heard her name once, not from a person, from a preacher in Laredo who burned his church down before hanging himself from the steeple. In his final sermon caught on audio, he screamed one thing over and over again: "Harrow wakes, Harrow wakes, Harrow wakes." And the audio ends with him laughing, not like a man, but like something with no mouth. There's a stretch of Highway 67 between San Angelo and Presidio that the truckers call the Dead Mile. It's not actually a mile, it's closer to 12. But they say if you drive it past midnight, alone, with your radio off, you'll see something in the road. Not a person, not an animal, just something. And if you don't stop, it follows you. If you do stop, well, no one really says what happens. They just shake their heads and mutter, "Don't ever pull over on the Dead Mile." I used to think it was just a story, a trucker myth, like the ghost hitchhiker or the phantom headlights. I'd been driving for 9 years by then, mostly hauling equipment and chemicals out of refineries in Odessa. I'd done that stretch 100 times, day and night. But one delivery in early July changed everything. It was supposed to be simple. Run a load of parts to a remote drilling site near Marfa, drop and go. I'd done the route before long. Dry, nothing but wind turbines and desert. I left late that day, expecting to hit the Dead Mile sometime after midnight. I wasn't worried. I'd done worse routes and worse weather. At 12:22 a.m., I passed the faded green sign, Presidio 61 miles. That's when my headlights flickered. Just once, like a blink. Then they came back full. I tapped the dash. Nothing else went out. CB, GPS, even the AC still hummed, but I felt it. That shift in the air, like someone had flipped a switch I couldn't see. The road ahead stretched flat and straight, nothing but scrub and sand on either side. I killed the radio out of curiosity. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a deer, something low and pale in the headlights, standing still on the yellow line. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't moving, just standing. Tall, human shape, but wrong. No clothes. No hair. Skin like old wax smooth, too reflective. Its arms hung stiff at its sides, long and unbending. Its head was tilted slightly, like it was listening for something underground. No face. Not exactly. Just depressions where the eyes and mouth should have been, as if someone had sculpted it and forgotten the details. My instinct was to swerve, but I didn't. I slowed down, then stopped. I don't know why it didn't move. Not even when my high beams hit it dead on. Just stood there, in that crooked silence. And I swear on every dead man's grave it was smiling, not with a mouth, with its skin. Like its whole face was bending around some invisible joke. I sat there, frozen for what felt like an hour. Then the cab went cold. Not cooler, cold, like I'd driven into a meat locker. My breath fogged, the windows iced at the edges. The thing in the road took a step forward. And that's when I came to my senses. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and backed up 50 feet, then gunned it hard into the opposite lane. As I passed the thing, it turned its head slow, deliberate, and watched me go. No eyes, but I knew it was watching. I didn't stop until I hit the next rest area near Shafter. I pulled in shaking, hands numb from how tightly I'd gripped the wheel. Sat there until the sun came up. When I checked the truck, I found something on the front grille, a handprint, not burnt, not painted. Indented, like something had pressed into the metal and left a perfect inhuman handprint 6 fingers. Long and spindly, almost fused together at the knuckles. The metal was cold to the touch, colder than it should have been after sitting in the desert all night. I never finished that delivery. Turned around, headed back to Odessa, and called dispatch with a fake tire blowout excuse. They docked my pay. I didn't care, but it didn't stop there. 2 nights later, I woke up in my apartment to find my boots soaked, not just damp. Soaked, like I'd walked through a flooded basement. The floor was dry, no leaks. Nothing out of place, except for the trail of dirty water leading to my front door. That's when the dream started. The road. Always the dead mile. Always that thing waiting in the center. Sometimes I'd be driving toward it. Sometimes I was outside the truck, barefoot, walking toward it against my will. In one dream, I climbed into the cab and found myself already sitting there, watching myself, smiling. After 2 weeks of this, I talked to another trucker at a fuel stop in Fort Stockton, old-timer named Rudy, wrinkled face, dead eyes. He listened without laughing. Then he said, "You stopped, didn't you?" I didn't answer. He nodded like he knew already. It marks you when you do that. You gave it time to see you, to notice. Now it knows your name. I asked him what it wanted. He shrugged. It wants what's owed. All that road, all those bones buried under it, it collects. He paused. Ever wonder why there ain't mile markers out there? I hadn't, but he was right. There weren't, not on that stretch. He leaned close then and whispered, "If you dream of the road 3 times, it means it's getting closer. 4, and you're already on it." That night was the 4th dream. I woke up in the driver's seat, not my bed. Not my apartment. The truck's cab. Engine off. Dashboard. Dark. And outside only the road. Only that stretch. Empty. Black. Silent. I looked out the window. It was standing there. Closer now. Its hand raised. Beckoning. And when I screamed, no sound came out because I wasn't in my body anymore. Was on the road. Still there now. I think maybe I never left that night. Maybe that stretch isn't 12 miles. Maybe it's infinite. And maybe the dead mile doesn't take you off the road. It just keeps you there. Forever.